Hey, so this is going to be the first incel video that I've made in a while. I watched What If Alt Hist's video called The Coming Incel Revolution, like, I can't remember, weeks or months ago. But to be honest with you, it was so boring that I forgot almost immediately everything in it. And I was really busy at the time too. Not to overshare a little, but unfortunately, I was desperately trying to hold the new job I got with PNC Bank together, and it did not hold up. A few weeks ago, I got fired from it. So luckily, it looks like I'll be starting a new job with Charles Schwab soon, and I'll finally be getting out of Columbus, Ohio, moving to Omaha, Nebraska. But that was kind of why I kind of didn't make much about that. Also, What If Alt Hist made another video about religion, as did PaxTube. But honestly, I was going to react to them, but then I got kind of bored because they just I don't know. PaxTube's video was about Protestants and Catholics fighting with each other and how Catholicism was so much better than Protestantism. And even back when I was engrossed in the world of religion, I never really understood why Protestants and Catholics endlessly fight. It all seemed stupid to me back then, and it still seems stupid to me now. So I don't know. It's like, yeah, whatever. Protestants and Catholics still hate each other. The only thing that ever unites them is their hatred of Muslims and atheists. So, and yeah, and then What If All His video on religion? I actually still haven't watched it. I may do a reaction to that soon. But anyways, that's one other reason I was going to do this incel video. I was actually watching a thing recently on both incels and femcels. And that's kind of what perked my interest just a little bit to make this. The interesting thing about it was, comparing the incels and the femcels in the video, and it just made me think too about how my views on incels and just the general topic have kind of evolved over the years. And, back when I first made, I think my very first few incel videos, like one was about called Why I Empathize with Incels, but not with their views. The other one was on Is Japan Becoming a Nation of Incels? I was kind of surprised at how many views those videos got. And on the whole, most of the comments I got on it were relatively good. I mean, there was, of course, people that posted a lot of stuff I don't agree with. As those of you know, I don't define myself as an incel. Um, I don't frequent incel forums, and I wouldn't say that I agree with a lot of things I've seen in incel ideologues. Um, but I do. I am 33, soon to be 34 this May. Um, Never had a relationship, never dated, and I understand a little bit the plight of incels. In fact, maybe even a little better than some incels do themselves, especially maybe the younger ones or ones who have maybe had relationships and then they maybe just one or two relationships and then they talk about how they base all of their opinions on women off of that one relationship or something. But there's a lot of incels that are not hateful or sexist people whatsoever. That's why, like, I made one video. I can't remember. I think I actually deleted it. Called "Why Elliot Rodger Was a Terrorist, Not an Incel." Though a lot of incels do idolize him, and that's a terrible thing because Elliot Rodger was a terrible person, and he was mentally insane. I mean, I've actually watched a lot about Elliot Rodger over the years because he was kind of an interesting story. How he. I hate to say this, but in some ways, certain aspects of his social problems were a little bit relatable for someone even like myself. He was very quiet, very reserved when he was younger. Again, that fits me. He was one big difference between me and him. I mean, when I was his age, back in my late teens, early 20s, I was not what you'd call angry at women. I was a little frustrated with my dating life, but I was not by any means, like like he was about it. Like I remember one instance that just always shocked me. Like the one time when he had in his diary where he wrote about where he got pushed off the ledge when he was at a party by some guys that where he'd gotten into a fight with, and then he broke his ankle and he was limping home. One of the girls offered to like drive him home or something, and he was mad at her for not offering to have sex with him in addition to driving him home and consoling him or whatever. Um, I don't know that. In addition to just being crazy, that grabs me as a really weird level of anger at women that just doesn't even really make sense, you know. But where I'm just kind of going with this is, my views on the topic have kind of evolved a little bit over the years since I started doing those videos. I mean, one thing I can say that I has changed, especially when I just kind of was reminded when I was watching the documentary about incels and femcels, is that usually people who don't have a lot of success in dating, there is usually something else going on in their life that kind of also goes along with that lack of success in dating that causes it, and also maybe causes them to be not so happy. And that applies to me as well. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've always had some social problems in life. I've always been too reserved, too quiet. I have a lot of problems making new connections with people. It's not so much once I'm in a relationship with people that I have problems. I mean, I can be a little weird and socially awkward, but it's more just making the initial connection. That's always been my problem ever since I was a kid, and still is in my 30s. And that probably is the issue with, me even now, But, and it's not just in, dating, it's in work, it's in, social interactions, it's with my neighbors. It's a problem in many areas of my life, and this happens to be one of the areas that it affects disproportionately is my, dating and relationships. Um, and it's probably one of the biggest sources of misery in my life. And I notice a lot of incels, it's maybe not specifically that issue, but they usually do have something kind of like that. There's something going on in their life that isn't particularly good. Maybe they have some social problems. Maybe they have a lot of just overall problems with just keeping their life together, in general. Or sometimes it is looks. I mean, not always. And usually I find that it's not nearly as much as they think it is. But I've seen some incels where maybe it's a little bit looks, or maybe they may not realize it, but it's something like hygiene as well, or the way they dress. Because especially if you're a guy, the way you dress and your hygiene, that's a huge part of it when it comes to dating. One thing I know, you can be very good looking, and if you stink, you're gonna have troubles with dating. Women are much more sensitive to those kind of things than we are. Men, I mean, men notice that stuff too, but I'm just saying, if a guy has enormously bad BO, it's going to be really hard for him to have a lot of dating success. um, but anyways, yeah, wait, I got a little off track there. Sorry. Um, where I was just going with this is, I mean, I empathize with incels, and I don't think all of them are hateful, sexist people. I don't consider myself a hateful, sexist person. I disagree with a lot of things I see in incel forums, and I also was looking at like what the femcels were saying too, and their stuff really wasn't much different from incels. I mean, I disagree with it for the most part. A lot of it was directed about how bad men were and about how they would just be incapable of dating because they didn't think they were good looking enough, or that men were just too aggressive, or men were just not people they could have relationships with. Just stuff that really didn't make a lot of sense. But in some ways, I understood the overall. I empathized a little bit with their overall plight, because one of them, she was actually fairly, at least two of them actually were fairly attractive women, and one of them I can literally say I was attracted to, seen in the video. But she'd had a bad relationship with a man, and she'd just kind of written off all men after that one or two bad experiences she'd had. Another woman just clearly had some self-esteem and looks issues. She was very attractive, but she believed herself to be extremely unattractive, and it was abundantly clear that was not the problem to anybody that looked at her. But she clearly thought that was, and you could tell she just didn't. Was really lacking perspective, um, and it was really not. When you go to the incel side of things, then, which of course is all men, um, very often it's similar things. There's usually something else in their life they're not particularly happy about, or something that's a much bigger problem really than their dating, that unfortunately affects their dating lives as well, that kind of makes them unhappy. And sometimes it's just men just reaching out on forums to other men just to try to find advice or empathy, or just complain about their problems together. And that's why I make these videos. I mean, I'm frustrated with my dating life. I'm 33, about to turn 34. I mean, that's not normal, to be this age and not have had anything. And I understand what it's like very well. And I empathize with incels who are frustrated with their lives. I empathize with femcels as well, you know. But where I guess I just take a different approach to some incels is, I would say that um, I don't think it's so much of just a male problem. I think it's really more of a just general problem with not just American society, but a lot of Western societies, that we're becoming more and more branched off in our online bubbles. We're becoming more and more isolated. And as like I explored in my video about Japan and how there's a large number of Japanese young people who, both male and female, who will go without any kind of relationships when they're younger. Um, I think it's just a product of the modern age, you know. Um, and that, of course, the one thing I always emphasize in that, where I disagree with some incels, you know, Japan still has a lot of traditional gender norms. You know, it's still very, very common in Japan for men to have to be the breadwinners and for women to have to be the child caretakers or homemakers, even if the woman had spent a lot of time on her educational background. So that's one reason why a lot of people in Japan either don't get married or don't have relationships. And um, I think that kind of supports some of my view, though, that where I disagree with some incels who will say that, well, this is a sign that we need to go back to getting married and we all need to, you know, we need to, women can't have the choice of having sexual partners. Women can't, you know, feminism is all a mistake. Again, I don't define myself as a feminist, but also not as an anti feminist. Well, that's where I disagree with them, because then if that was the case, Japan would have no issues whatsoever, you know. Um, and also, you know, I just, I don't know, I just believe that in general, more choice is better for both men and women. The freedom of choice, I'm a big believer in freedom of ideas, freedom of choice, and just, I guess you could say, freedom of a lot of things, which is one reason why I tend to lean more that direction. I guess you could say being more liberal on those kind of things. Um, but one thing I completely understand about incels, and where I do agree with them on, is that I think dating in the modern world, particularly for men under the age of 40, is harder than it was in some past generations. Okay, and I don't think everything about life in our generation is harder. I think there's a lot of things that are much easier than they were for our forefathers' generation. So I'm not trying to whine about how life is getting worse, because I don't think it is on the whole. But one thing I do think that has gotten just a lot more complicated is dating for both men and women alike. And one big difference is, you know, when you look at some statistics and data, there's just a large undergrowth of men who have had few, if any, relationships under 40. And it's growing at a phenomenally fast rate in the United States and Europe. I apologize for not having the statistics with me, but it was actually a long time ago I watched the video and I was stunned at the rate at which it was increasing, that men were just not having relationships or sex or anything, you know, and women too, they are on the increase. But the reason that you know, I guess also that I think that it's so hard for men and for women, you know, than the younger generations, is that people just don't take the problem that seriously. You know, What If Alt Hist made a video called The Coming Incel Revolution, and on the whole it was kind of silly. But one thing he did do that I liked, he addressed in it, is he just kind of addressed it as a real problem, which I think it really truly is. I don't like how, you know, I don't think I have the worst life. I don't think I have the best life. I don't think I have the worst life. But I can tell you it is one of the biggest areas of frustration in my life is just my general, you know, social life. It's never been particularly good. And I don't just mean dating. I mean, just in general, I've always kind of had some problems socially, you know. Um, that's why I'm a nerd who spends all his life on work and school, you know, and making videos on the internet or whatever, you know. Um, and one of those areas that I'm disproportionately affected by is dating, you know, because a big part of dating is social. And, you know, especially as I've gotten older, I've started to realize just how far behind I am in a lot of these things. And that's why it bothers me, because I hate when people also say, well, you've got plenty of time, whatever. I mean, I'm almost 34 years old, you know, in 6 years, I will officially be middle aged. Hard to believe. I mean, you know, you don't want to do all this when you're 40 or over. I mean, you can do some of it when you're over 40. There's plenty of time to do some of that, but some of it you want to do when you're younger, because I'm already getting to the age that, you know, it's getting a little harder to stay in shape. It's some of, I don't know, some of your plumbing doesn't quite work as well as it did when you were younger. Not, I don't want to go into too much detail, but you know, certain things just start changing as you get older. And yeah, you want to do some of that stuff when you're younger, you know, and it's a part of life. It's a pretty big part of life, you know. It's not, you know, worth killing yourself over, or worth, it's not the only thing in life if it's not going according to plan. But I can honestly tell you that it's probably one of the things I'm most disappointed about in my life thus far to date. You know, and that's why it kind of frustrates me when some people will just like roll their eyes and say, "Oh, you're just, you're a whiner. Oh, you've got plenty of time. Don't worry about it," or something. It's like, well, it may not be the worst thing in the world, but to be honest with you, it definitely is a problem in life. And I understand that issue with incels too, who have that issue, and with femcels. Um, One big difference between the men and women on this is that a lot of women, I think, under 40, they're more likely to have had at least one or two relationships. Even women who have problems with dating, but they're more likely to probably not be super satisfied with those relationships. It's much more common for women to get into relationships with much older men. It happens with men too, but it's just not as common. And usually, on the whole, women who have relationships with much older men usually report lower rates of happiness in those relationships. Not always, but I mean, just going off of statistics, once I watched a video about um, women who are in relationships with older men or men who are in relationships with older women. And if the age gap goes much over 10 to 15 years, the satisfaction rate tends to go down a lot in the relationship in terms of the happiness. And I can kind of understand that because I think age gaps are not a bad thing necessarily, but age gaps where it's more than like 10 to 20 years gets pretty weird. So there's a lot of women who also, I don't know, it's easier for women to have sex at just about any age in life, but it's harder for, I think, women to have good sex and, relationships that they want to, even with men their own age. That's just a common observation I've had. But in general, like, I guess the one thing that I just kind of want to make this video about and comment on is that one thing that has changed as I've gotten older is that I would say I still, on the by and large, I would say I still disagree with a lot of the ideology I've seen in incel forums. But what I do not disagree with is the fact that incels are right, that this is an issue in general. This, it really is, I think, one of the biggest crises within our generation is that we're kind of at the crossroads where a lot of things are changing. It was still more common in our father's generation, and where you'd get married at an early age and stay married your whole life. And before them, it was still pretty common that marriages were arranged. Of course, we're a byproduct of the sexual revolution and many other things, and many things about that are good. But one of the problems is that we're also doing this while technology is changing and we're all becoming more isolated. And honestly, I think it just leads to a lot more people sometimes just being uncertain of how to proceed in their dating lives. And that goes for traditionalists or people who are non-traditionalists, people who want to stay single their whole life and maybe just have isolated relationships, people who want to get married and want to have kids. I think people are just not as sure as how they used to be about how to proceed with all the different freedom and choices that we have. And in general, it's a good thing, but I think the problem is it's just one of the biggest things when you look throughout history. Sometimes when a lot of things change too fast, sometimes the crossroads of technology and society changing can have, problems. That's a dumb way to put it, but I mean, there's I don't know, there's fallout. Back in World War One was one of the best examples where old strategies of war clashed with new technologies and it led to unbelievably high casualties. Obviously, you know, comparing that's a pretty grave example to compare it with. But in the modern world, we have unbelievable technologies at our disposal nowadays, but that can also pose a lot of problems. The internet and social media is amazing, but it also can be one of the most miserable and depressing things on the planet because there's so much negativity on the internet. There's so much fake news out there. There's so much fake information and so much there's so many on these social media channels that just post nonsense. And another flip side of that is, we all kind of we can connect with each other on the internet, but we also kind of disconnect in person. So I don't know. I'm young. I'm still relatively young. I mean, like I said, I'm 33, soon to be 34. But I I just felt it's been a while since I made a video commenting about incels, and just I wanted to talk a little bit about it because it is a topic that's been on my mind a little bit over the last some years of life. And um, I understand why incels get really depressed and upset about this topic, because it is something that matters, you know, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And you know, for those of you who think, oh, you know, this is just some, you know, a guy whining about, you know, his life and he hates women or whatever. Well, again, I don't define as an incel, and I like I said, I disagree with the majority of things I see in incel forums. I think it's also, but it also applies to a lot of young women as well. You know, I think it's really, it's more of just a byproduct of our just overall, you know, the situation of our generation being in the crossroads that we're in, that dating for both men and women sucks a lot worse than it used to be. And you don't have to look any further than dating apps to kind of realize that. You know, I mean, for women, dating apps are better than men. I mean, you can get matches easier, but of course, for women, there's more risks with dating apps, that they're going to get some psycho mass killer or something, or that they're going to get a guy who's just basically looking to have a real quick one night stand with them and then, you know, leave them knocked up the next day or whatever. With men, as a guy who's tried using dating apps over the years, I can tell you what the problem is with them. And that's just that you can be on them endlessly and nothing will happen. Or on the one or two occasions something will happen, it'll truly just be the bottom tier people you'll find on the app. And I'm sorry, that's maybe a mean way to put it, but it's just true. We're talking the least attractive, the least likable, the least everything will be the only matches you'll ever get, you know. And yeah, dating apps are a living example of just how certain things about dating do kind of suck, I think, for our generation, you know. So I don't know. It's an interesting issue. It's one that I don't understand that well. And like I said, I don't think it's, I think it's usually connected to other issues as well. You know, like in my life, it's social problems with many other incels or femcels. It's usually connected to other issues in their life too. But it's something I think that I'll continue to make videos about and continue to address, even if people call me names or call me an incel or call me things that I'm not. Just because I do think it's something that, you know, if you know, affects us all, and it just needs to be addressed. So like I said, my next video will probably not be an incel one. It'll probably be about, I think, maybe a reaction to what if altist. But as usual, thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.